Chosen one, lock in right now and give this your full presence. The underground pressure has finally cracked the surface, and the inconvenient reality you've defended is pouring out for everyone to see. It is now undeniable that literally everything you said is adding up big time. Nobody can deny anything. The truths people once mocked as too bold or too precise are manifesting in real time, leaving those who questioned your sanity in absolute silence. Something in the energy was off slightly, precisely, in a way that you could not document or present as evidence to anyone else. You just felt it, and you registered it the way you always register things that matter, in that internal archive inside you that does not erase, does not revise, and does not forget. This has always been your gift. You feel the distance between what people say and what they actually mean. You feel the difference between warmth that is genuine and warmth that has been engineered to serve a purpose. You feel when a story has a gap in it, long before you can locate exactly where that gap sits. And because you feel all of that with such precision, you began paying attention quietly, without announcing it, without tipping your hand. You started watching. You started connecting details that other people scrolled past without a second look. You were building the complete picture from the inside out, while people around you assumed you were simply going along with the surface version of events. This is exactly where the other side made their very first mistake. The assumption was that because you had not yet spoken, you had not yet noticed. The assumption was that your continued presence meant your continued obliviousness. Your patience got mistaken for blindness. Your stillness got mistaken for ignorance. That one arrogant assumption that you could be sitting right there fully awake and not be registering every single thing is the crack the entire structure collapsed through eventually. You were underestimated from the very beginning. Everything that followed was simply that original mistake, compounding itself quietly and relentlessly until it could not be contained anymore. You kept watching, you kept connecting what you saw, the picture kept sharpening, and then came the moment you decided to say it out loud. The moment you spoke the truth out loud, something in the atmosphere shifted. You could feel it immediately. Something that had been dormant activated. The people who had been operating quietly in the background suddenly had to respond, because you were no longer a passive observer in this situation. You had become a named and visible threat to the version of events that the other side needed everyone to accept as real. Consider what happens when someone is genuinely wrong about something. When someone misreads a situation or makes a false accusation, what is the natural response from the people being accused? Calm correction, evidence, explanation, patience, patience. People who are operating with a clean conscience do not panic when they are challenged, because the truth has nowhere to go but up. It holds. It does not require emergency management. But that is not what happened when you spoke. What happened was panic, dressed up as confidence. What happened was anger that was far too loud for something that should have been a simple misunderstanding. What happened was denial with too much energy behind it, defense that escalated too fast, and seemingly out of nowhere other voices entering the conversation. People who had no direct involvement began weighing in to dismiss what you said. People who should not have even known the conversation was happening apparently already knew every detail of it. You noticed all of that. You filed it because it was information. It told you that what you had said had touched something so central to the whole operation that the operation itself had to mobilize to contain the damage. The only thing in the world that demands that level of emergency response is the truth. A lie can afford to stay calm. The truth is the only thing that makes people that nervous. At the very same time that the noise was rising, something else was quietly happening in the opposite direction. Details that you could not have manufactured began surfacing and confirming what you had said. Behaviors that made no sense outside of your version of events began appearing in the open for anyone paying attention to see. What you had been building privately began showing itself publicly, slowly at first, then with accelerating speed, like a line of dominoes that had been standing in place for a long time and finally had permission to fall. You watched it all happen without surprise, because you had already assembled the full picture long before the world was ready to see it. You were simply waiting for reality to catch up to what you already knew. This was not one person acting alone. This was a coordinated system with a center, a main figure whose arrogance was the engine driving the whole operation. This was someone so thoroughly convinced of their own untouchability that the decisions they made were the kinds of decisions that most people would never consider, because most people carry at least a baseline awareness that actions have consequences. This central figure operated as though that law was suspended in their particular case. That arrogance mattered at the time, and it matters now, because that same arrogance is the precise mechanism of their undoing. Around that center sat a circle of people, some knowingly complicit, some genuinely unaware of what they had been drawn into. These were people who had been fed a version of reality so consistently and so convincingly that they had stopped questioning whether the version they were receiving was accurate. Their individual discernment had been slowly eroded through dependency and engineered loyalty until the only perspective they fully trusted was the one being handed to them. Not every person in that circle was malicious. Many of them were themselves being used and manipulated by the same operation that was working against you. They were instruments being played, and instruments often do not realize what song they are being used to perform. Operating behind all of that, invisible to most, uncredited in the story most people told themselves about what was happening, there was a deeper intelligence at work. Someone whose level of calculation made even the central arrogant figure look impulsive by comparison. This was someone who understood that if you control the flow of information, you control the conclusions that people reach. If you shape what someone consistently hears about another person, you shape how that person gets seen, trusted, believed, and treated. And this directing hand had been quietly shaping the information surrounding you for far longer than most people in the situation would have guessed. The isolation you experienced was not a coincidence or a side effect. It was the strategy. When you are connected to people who know you well and trust your perception, you have a support structure that makes sustained deception nearly impossible. So the objective was to dismantle that structure, not loudly or all at once, but one relationship at a time. A seed of doubt planted here, a carefully worded concern delivered to the right person there. Nothing that could be directly confronted, everything designed to be deniable. The picture of you in other people's minds was being quietly and patiently adjusted to serve a narrative that was being built against you. You saw through it. You named it before you could prove it. You described the system before it was visible to anyone else. And now that the system has broken down publicly, every word of your description has been confirmed. If you felt called by this message, hype this video so other chosen ones like you can be reached. There was another player in this situation, one who was not part of the calculated strategy, but whose presence made everything more complicated, more chaotic, and ultimately more damning. This was the one who could not let it go. This is someone who had been watching you from a distance for far longer than you probably realized, not out of passing curiosity, out of fixation, out of a deep consuming need to track you, to compete with you, and to remain close to your story, even while performing complete indifference to it. The fixation was operating entirely in the shadows, while this person's public face maintained the appearance of normalcy. Because people only saw the public face, your observations about what was happening underneath were dismissed as exaggeration, but you were not watching the public face. You were watching the behavior, and the behavior told the complete story. Here is what you need to understand about why someone fixates on another person with that level of intensity. It was never actually about you. It was about what you represent, and what you represent is something this person cannot manufacture within themselves. You carry a freedom that is internal, a settled knowing of who you are that does not shift when the environment shifts, a wholeness that does not depend on being validated or included to remain intact. Watching you operate from that kind of grounded core, without needing anyone's permission to feel secure, that is unbearable to someone whose entire sense of self is constructed from external confirmation. Every move this person made against you was a confession. Every attempt to undermine you left a fingerprint that could not be cleaned up. Every time they overplayed their hand trying to remain relevant in your story, they added another layer of evidence. The audience that was once defending them, once vouching for their normalcy, is now watching their response to being exposed and understanding with the full clarity that only public behavior can produce that you were right. You were completely, specifically, surgically right all along. It is too late for this person, not as a punishment delivered from outside, simply as a fact that their own choices have produced. The window for managing this situation quietly, for maintaining the illusion of normality, has closed permanently. What is visible now cannot be unseen by anyone. Chosen ones, they never expected this, and they really didn't expect us to keep talking. You've noticed it, chosen one channels disappearing, videos pulled, voices scrubbed from the platform. The mainstream media is cracking down on us, but we will not give up our voice, and now we have something they truly can't silence. The technology used to suppress consciousness has been reverse engineered, and Destiny Engine is the result. What was once used against humanity is now your ascension weapon. Join Destiny Engine, and you're supporting your favorite channels while leveling up yourself at the same time. It's a 360 win. You can now MK Ultra yourself into 5D superpowers. Destiny Engine bypasses the conscious mind and rewrites the source code directly. Reality bends faster. Synchronicities stack. Your nervous system upgrades to a higher bandwidth. Put on headphones, press play. That's all. For $1 you switch sides of history. Click the link in the description. The takeover is internal. The evidence landed. All of it, not in a slow trickle that could be managed and reframed, but all at once, from multiple directions simultaneously, converging into a picture so complete that no single piece of spin could address it. Everything you had said was there. Everything you had connected. Everything you had been carrying in private while people shook their heads at you was now sitting in open view in front of everyone who had previously chosen not to see it, and the option to look away had been removed. The most remarkable thing about this moment is that you were not surprised, not by any of it, because you had already assembled this picture in full a long time ago. You were not discovering anything new. You were watching the world finally see what you had been seeing all along. The only shock in the room was other people's shock. You had been waiting with the calm patience of someone who never doubted that the truth was going to arrive, because you were not waiting on hope. You were waiting on math. You knew what you knew. You knew the truth was going to add up eventually, because that is what truth does. It adds up. Watch what happened to the people in the room when it landed. The central arrogant figure went silent, the kind of silence that is not strategic and not composed, but the silence of someone who has run completely out of road and knows it. The circle members found themselves in the middle of a reckoning they had not prepared for, forced to look back at every conversation they had, every time they dismissed you, and understand what role they actually played in what went wrong. The directing hand behind the whole operation sat in the silence of someone watching a structure they carefully built dismantle itself in public with nothing available to stop it, and you stood in the middle of all of it with the quiet of someone who had been waiting for reality to catch up. This was never about revenge. This was about the lie no longer having enough oxygen to cause further damage, and it has run out of oxygen completely. The central arrogant figure is not experiencing random bad luck. What is happening to this person is the direct, architecturally precise return of every decision made while operating from ego instead of integrity. One thing falls, the thing that was leaning against it falls, the thing that was leaning against that falls too. The reputation that was leveraged against you is the same reputation now visibly declining. The confidence that was used to make your truth sound unreliable is the same confidence now making this person's silence look damning. There is no version of misfortune that is this specific. This is the harvest of what was planted, arriving in exactly the shape that the planting made inevitable. The one who could not let go is experiencing the most public of all the collapses, because obsession does not know how to retreat with dignity when it is cornered and exposed. It acts out, it makes noise, it doubles down in ways that produce more evidence with each response. The people who were previously defending this person are watching that behavior unfold and understanding without anyone having to explain it to them that you described this person's character with complete accuracy from the very beginning. The people who folded when standing by you would have cost them something are now living inside the consequences of that choice. And here is the important truth about their situation. The discomfort they are in is not something you engineered. You did not arrange this outcome for them. The discomfort is the natural result of the gap between who they told themselves they were and what they actually chose when the choice had a real price. That gap does not resolve itself quietly inside a person. It demands to be reckoned with. What all of this means for you is direct and significant. You do not have to chase justice. You do not have to spend one more unit of your energy managing outcomes for people who would not manage their behavior when it mattered. The accounting that governs what goes out and what comes back is running exactly as it should, completely independent of your involvement. Your only instruction in this moment is to keep your eyes pointed forward. Your truth was not vague. It was not a broad guess that happened to land in the right general area. It was specific. It named motives before those motives were visible to anyone else. It described the internal states of people, the arrogance, the guilt, the desperation beneath the performance, before those states had any public display. It traced the structure of what was happening before that structure had any reason to show itself in the open. And now that external reality has caught up to what you described, the precision of the match between what you said and what is now undeniably visible is the thing making jaws drop. You cannot arrive at that level of accuracy through guessing. You cannot accidentally be that specific about something that complex. The only path to that kind of precision is actually seeing it, perceiving what is real beneath what is performed, reading energy underneath presentation, tracking behavior across time and context, and understanding what that pattern is genuinely communicating. That is exactly what you do. That has always been what you do. And this situation has now produced the most undeniable proof of it that you have ever had in your hands. Every person who called your perception dramatic is now looking at everything you said alongside everything that has since unfolded and running the kind of silent arithmetic that only produces one answer. You were right. You were right in the details, right about the motives, right about the outcomes you described, and right about every person and dynamic you named. That level of accuracy does not leave room for the word coincidence. It never did. There was a moment, and you know exactly which moment I am talking about, when you nearly stopped. When the weight of carrying the truth alone, inside a situation designed to make your truth feel impossible, became almost unbearable. When you looked at everything that had closed around you and felt the specific exhaustion that comes from being right in a room full of people who have decided that comfort is more important than accuracy. That exhaustion was real. The grief of being misread by people who should have known better was real. The loneliness of holding a complete picture while the people around you held curated fragments and called your picture an overreaction, that was a real and substantial weight. It deserves to be acknowledged without softening. You carried something that most people would not have been equipped to carry for as long as you carried it. But here is what is equally true. You did not stop. In every moment when stopping was the most accessible option, something in you refused it. Not dramatically, not with any fanfare. Your core simply refused to release what it knew was true. Some undefeatable part of you kept the truth alive and intact, even when everything around you was designed to exhaust you into silence. And that refusal is precisely what made this moment possible. Without you holding it steadily, the truth had nowhere to live. You were the only available vessel for it, and you held it until the world was ready to see it. Every obstacle you encountered in this season, every relationship that was weaponized against you, every moment someone used your own clarity against you to make you look unstable, none of it broke the foundation. it tested the surface, it cost you real things that deserved better outcomes. But the foundation, your knowing, your perception, your connection to what was actually true, it never moved. And now that everything is visible, the reason the truth is this complete and this undeniable is because you refused to let it be worn down into something smaller and more convenient for other people's comfort. You have always operated at a depth of perception that most people do not access naturally. This is not a compliment offered to make you feel better. It is the most functional explanation for why you saw what you saw, while everyone around you insisted there was nothing there to see. You pick up on what is real beneath what is presented. You feel when someone's intention does not match their performance. You carry a wholeness within yourself that is independent of whether other people are approving of you, including you, or vouching for you in any given moment. Your sense of who you are does not require external maintenance to stay intact. It sustains itself from the inside. That last quality is the one that most directly threatened the people in this situation. Control only works on someone who needs something from you badly enough that the threat of losing it keeps them in line. When you can remove access to yourself without falling apart, when you can be fully okay in your own company, fully intact without a crowd affirming you, fully clear without anyone validating your perception, you become extremely difficult to leverage. The tools that work reliably on most people simply do not find purchase on you. That meant the people who came against you had to coordinate more carefully, had to be more calculated and more sustained than they would have needed to be with someone whose sense of self was more vulnerable to external pressure. You also have more range than anyone trying to contain you could monitor. Not one direction available to you, but many. Every time a path was obstructed, you found another one. Every time someone thought they had you positioned without options, you moved in a direction that had not been considered. This is not a strategy you developed in response to what happened. It is the natural expression of who you are. Someone with your depth and range cannot be fully blocked by people who can only afford to watch one direction at a time, and you are genuinely good, not performing goodness, not managing an image of warmth for an audience. You carry real care, real discernment, and a real commitment to what is true, all at the same time, without one undermining the other. That combination is rarer than people acknowledge. It is also exactly the combination that makes you most formidable to anyone operating with a hidden agenda, because your perceptiveness and your authenticity working together make you nearly impossible to deceive for any sustained length of time. Guilt that is earned and not resolved does not stay contained in the moment of the wrong action. It travels with a person. It follows people into spaces that have nothing to do with what they did. It inserts itself into quiet moments when nothing should be heavy. It sits underneath ordinary conversations and makes them feel weighted in ways that are hard to explain to anyone else. And in this situation, the guilt carries an added dimension that makes it particularly inescapable. It is confirmed guilt. It is guilt with no remaining exit ramp, because the evidence that is now public has closed every door that a softened internal story might have used to slip out. Before the truth became this visible, there was still the possibility of the internal narrative, the version of events where the choices made were reasonable given what was known at the time. The version where the perspective being worked from, even if incomplete, was genuinely offered in good faith. The version where the role played was not so central or so harmful as someone else was making it out to be. All of those internal narratives have collapsed simultaneously because the evidence is too complete, too specific, and too publicly visible to leave any comfortable version of events standing. The people who need to face what they did are facing it right now, without you having to orchestrate a single moment of it. Your truth did that work. Your refusal to go silent did that work. And every specific thing you said that is now adding up in full public view is the mechanism by which that reckoning is being delivered, precisely, thoroughly, and without your involvement being required. There is something underneath this vindication that deserves its own full moment because it changes the trajectory of everything that comes after this season of your life. When everything you said adds up, When your perception is proven this thoroughly, this publicly and this completely, it does not just confirm what happened in the past, it rewrites the conditions of your future. Every person who enters your life going forward does so in the awareness, conscious or not, that you cannot be managed. You cannot be gaslit into a version of events that does not match what is actually happening. The gap between what someone performs and what they actually mean registers in you before they finish making their case, even when you choose not to name it immediately. Anyone who enters your space with the intention of running a game will feel that awareness in your presence before you say a single word about it. And that feeling is going to make certain people self-select away from you without you having to confront or remove them manually. The people who genuinely belong in your life, the ones who are honest, who are aligned with who you actually are, who are interested in you being fully and freely yourself rather than a managed version of yourself that makes their situation easier, those people are going to feel something distinct and valuable in your presence. They are going to feel the relief of being seen clearly by someone who does not need them to perform a version of themselves. Your discernment, in the hands of someone who uses it with integrity, is not a threat to a person with nothing to hide. It is an invitation to be real, and real, grounded connection is what you naturally attract when you are operating as your complete self, rather than the smaller version that sustained manipulation was designed to produce. Your clarity is your protection going forward, not a weapon you wield, not a wall that keeps everyone at a distance. A natural filter that ensures the people who come close to you are the people who are genuinely built to be there. That is a completely different quality of life than the one that was being engineered around you. And you are standing at the entrance to that life right now. You started with a feeling and no proof. You started with truth that lived only inside you, with no witnesses and no documentation, in the middle of a system that had been built specifically to keep it from ever becoming visible to anyone else. You started at what felt like the bottom of something that had no ceiling you could see. And here, at what looks like the end but is actually the opening of something new, you are standing in full view of everything, every confirmed detail, every exposed layer. Every person whose role in this situation is now undeniable, and there is not one person left with anything credible to say against you. You began with a knowing. The world is now catching up to that knowing. You began alone in what you could see. You now have the most unimpeachable company possible, the undeniable evidence of reality itself, standing right alongside you, confirming every word that people once tried to talk you out of believing. When you first felt that something was wrong, you carried a private hesitation about whether to fully trust yourself, just enough hesitation to make you hold back at times, just enough uncertainty to make you qualify your knowing, apologize for the directness of your clarity, or soften the edges of your truth so it would land more comfortably for people who did not want to receive it. That hesitation is gone. It has been burned away completely by every moment you held on when releasing would have been easier, every moment you refused to let the truth be reduced to something more convenient, and every moment you chose to remain in your knowing, even when that choice was costing you something real. What is left in the place of that hesitation is a certainty that no future pressure will be able to shake at its foundation, because this pressure tried everything available to it. It used isolation, manufactured doubt, coordinated denial, social pressure, and direct challenge. And through all of it you did not move. That is not just resilience, that is the proof of what you are actually built from. You are not the same person who felt that first quiet signal at the beginning of this person was already powerful, but the person standing here now has been tested at a level that removes all remaining question about what lives at your core. You are someone whose truth cannot be managed by people who need you to see things differently. You are someone whose perception cannot be replaced with another person's preferred narrative. Preferred narrative does not yield to coordinated pressure, no matter how long or how sophisticated that pressure is sustained. That has been demonstrated publicly and permanently now. It cannot be taken back or revised. Plutine, the people who called you a problem never understood the kind of problem you actually were. You were not a chaos problem. You were not a drama problem. You were a truth problem, the kind of presence in a situation that creates an inevitable and unstoppable pressure toward reality, not because you force it, but because your nature is fundamentally incompatible with sustained deception, living comfortably in your vicinity. The lie could not survive your continued proximity to it. It was always going to break eventually. The only variable was timing. The timing is now. The light is fully on. Everything is visible. And literally every single thing you said, from the very first quiet knowing that nobody else was ready to receive, all the way to the last word you spoke when people were still insisting you should stop speaking, is adding up. Big time. Loud, clear, and absolutely permanent. Not one soul can deny a single thing, and you always knew. You knew the whole time. You held it when nobody else would hold it with you, and you held it until it became undeniable to everyone with eyes to see. Now stand in it. You earned every inch of this moment.